Good evening. From sparring with Donald Trump on the campaign trail to becoming one of his first cabinet appointees, Nikki Haley sure has come a long way. She reportedly turned down the offer to be the Secretary of State, citing lack of foreign policy experience. And yet, she's become the new face of American foreign policy as the ambassador to the UN. And then, with characteristic unpredictability, she linked the Trump election with Russia. Is there a method to all of this, a plan? Some say that she may be the next presidential contender for the Republicans. On Gravitas tonight, we tell you all about the Indian American who's being called Trump's political heir. First up, the headlines. Terror comes visiting Russia. Explosions rock 2 train carriages at metro stations in St. Petersburg, killing at least 10 people and injuring 50, including children. Vladimir Putin vows full investigation. US President Donald Trump's son-in-law and advisor Jared Kushner visits Iraq with the top American military officials, meets local leaders and reviews the fight against the Islamic State. Continuing tragedy in Colombia, devastating mudslides in the town of Mocoa kill at least 254. Fears mount that the death toll could go up. And leftist government candidate Lenin Moreno claims victory in the presidential elections in Ecuador. The opposition calls the result a fraud. We're starting Gravitas this evening with the latest from Russia. 2 terror attacks ripped apart metro carriages in St. Petersburg on a day President Vladimir Putin was in the city to meet his Belarusian counterpart. Local news agencies reporting that the explosive device was left in a briefcase in the metro carriage. 9 people, some reports putting the death toll to 11 also. More than 50 others were injured, many of them children. The metro line had to be shut down. The airport nearby stepped up security. 41 ambulance teams were at the site. President Putin has said that the government is considering all possible causes, including terror. A third unexploded device was also recovered. Reports are already linking these attacks to the ISIS. And messages of condolence pouring in from leaders across the world and people as well who are watching developments in St. Petersburg. The U.S. Embassy warning its citizens to not venture out. The entire metro line, as we said, has been shut down. This attack happened around noon local time, and the area has not been declared safe. As yet, the metro services remain suspended. Not the first time we've seen local trains, metros being attacked in a major city, and a terror attack at that. No outfit has so far taken responsibility for what happened this afternoon in St. Petersburg. Joining us from London this evening is Joel Whitaker. He's a security analyst. Joel, you were with us right after the Westminster attacks, and we were looking at how things unfolded. Would you say this clearly is a terror attack?
It's got all the hallmarks of a terrorist attack. You know, multiple devices were used, so it would seem to be an organised attack. We can't say for sure. There is always the element or the chance that it could be a criminal act, maybe an act of distraction, but the hallmarks are there that it's a terrorist attack.
And many reports linking it to ISIS already. Would you say that's jumping the gun?
Yeah, it's tough to verify. So, yeah, I certainly wouldn't be one to say, yes, it's a terrorist attack and linked to ISIS just yet. The security services certainly will be looking into the different links. and I'm sure that terrorists like ISIS will be quick to claim it anyway, whether or not they were involved. So it's too early to say just at the moment.
Also joining us from Boston, Glenn Carl, former CIA operative. Glenn, your first instinct, as the details still sketchy from Russia, would you call it a terror attack, and is it too early to link it to the ISIS, as many are already doing it?
I think both statements I would agree with. Joel said it's too early to call it one, but it has all the hallmarks of one. And I agree with you that it's too early to link it with ISIS. I would point out that ISIS is credited with all sorts of horrible things and claims successes and operatives everywhere. But in fact, to my knowledge, the evidence is slight, if there is any, of ISIS having successfully actually trained and sent someone outside of their area of geographical control to conduct an attack. They inspire people. People claim that they are acting in their behalf, but that's a different issue. It's inspired jihadism, more likely. In this instance, we don't know, but with what's happening in Chechnya, what has happened in Chechnya for years, clearly the aggrieved, angry Chechens are the people where you would first look, I think.
Joel, India has seen repeated attacks on local trains, on interstate trains. London saw the tube attacks. IEDs used in many cases in India. In this case, they used TNT with shrapnel. This is the modus operandi that we see again and again, and yet it seems security agencies are not equipped, if that's the right word, to deal with this kind of terror operation.
Yeah, I mean, many attacks will have been thwarted before they obviously happened, and so in the planning stages, many attacks will have been thwarted by security services. Excuse me, and so therefore it's tough to know how effective they are, because of course they don't shout out about the attacks that have been stopped. They just crack on with it, and so. I think that it's fair to say that security services have been doing a good job, considering the threat of terrorism and the amount of terrorist acts and potential terrorist acts that are out there. But it is difficult. It is difficult for security services to stop such attacks, particularly when if it is a terrorist attack, particularly when terrorists are getting so much more advanced. In their levels of organisation and secrecy and the way that they communicate. You go back to the example in London where Khalid Massoud used an encrypted but commercially available app to talk to. Those sorts of devices they make it incredibly difficult for security services to find out when terrorist attacks are about to happen.
Glenn, this is a question I asked Joel earlier today, and let me put this to you. Any major city in the world is a potential has a potential terror threat, is potentially on the radar, but has Russia been involved in activities? Do you believe their involvement in the Syrian situation? Do you believe that has made it that has put Russia higher on the terror threat radar?
Oh, I think that's a fair assessment to make. The main threat for the Russians is their Muslim comes from their Muslim population within the Russian Federation, and that specifically is in Chechnya. There have been over the last 20 years significant numbers of Chechens in different theaters of the world that have been engaged in jihadist fighting and terrorism. And then Russia's actions in Chechnya have aggrieved and angered many Chechens. So that's the first thing. The second is, it is of course likely that as Russians are acting in an Islamic country, largely in Syria, they will anger those who are subscribed to the view that the kafir, the infidel, the outsider, the non-Muslim shouldn't be there. And just as America has been the target of anger and terrorist attacks for our actions in the Middle East, so now Russia will become more likely. So your assessment, yes, that's correct. We don't know, but odds are high that that's the foundation of the reason for the action.
And I can tell our viewers these are the latest images that we're getting of people coming to offer tributes, to pay homage to those who lost their lives. 11 people, according to some reports, others say 9. And many children have sustained injuries. We do not know how severe those injuries are. And Joel, we were talking about this earlier today. This is a real challenge for the agencies to be able to secure trains, local trains, metro lines, which are used by lakhs of people to commute every day. And this remains a perpetual challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking ahead, it's something that security services will want to bolster and to reinforce. Excuse me. Is there obviously their means of protecting the public, and that certainly will include areas where they know it's likely that terrorists are going to target, such as transport hubs, tourist areas, places basically where there's lots of people and where it's quite difficult to get emergency service help. And if we link that into St. Petersburg, you know, a bomb, a device going off on an underground station is a perfect target for terrorists. It's such a vast network of trains. It's tough to police each entrance and each exit, and therefore allowing a terrorist to go in with explosives with more ease potentially. And then, of course, if you look at the rescue efforts, they're often hampered, particularly with deep train stations. If you bring it to how the people would get out of there normally, is it an elevator? Well, that's incredibly tough then to get casualties out, get them stretchered, get them out to an ambulance at street level. And so, yeah, it's very tough for the security services looking ahead indeed. And I'm sure they'll be looking into the best procedures and plans looking forward.
Glenn, the Prosecutor General's office in St. Petersburg has called the subway explosion a terrorist attack. That's the latest we're getting by way of reports. How do you see Moscow responding? Well,
Moscow under Putin uses a pretty heavy hand. So if they might actually declare someone guilty just so that they can be shown to be taking strong action. They've done that sort of thing before. And I mean guilty without a court of law. They'll simply strike against the usual suspects, in a sense, the way Turkey sometimes does against their problem with the Kurds. So I would anticipate that to be the case. But if their services, the Russian intelligence services, are excellent, and if there is a possibility of identifying who actually perpetrated the attacks, the Russians are likely to find that out as anybody else. But whether they do or not, I think Putin will show a strong hand. That's part of his image and what he thinks asserts his power and reassures a frightened and angry public.
Right, Joel, this blast happened in a tunnel between metro stations, and that made the relief and rescue operation that much more challenging. The metro line has been shut down. Typically, they would be following an SOP to ensure that the entire area is cleared, that there is no more bomb that is waiting to explode. How long should this operation take, and do we expect heightened security for the next few days in this area?
And I think that the security services will obviously want to remedy this, to finish this as soon as possible, to evacuate casualties as soon as possible. I mean, the difficulties of taking casualties out, as we spoke about, from an underground station is immense. So that's going to take time. On top of the casualties, of course, there are many people who will be stranded and who won't want to be stranded. They will want to go home. They will want to phone their loved ones to let them know they're okay. And so there's a strain on in that area where the attack takes place. There's a lot of strain that requires a lot of security presence to police it, to cordon, to control. And so the security services, that takes a lot of manpower. And it also costs a lot of money. And so the security services will want to remedy that as soon as possible. And let's not forget the casualties. The longer it takes to get a casualty out of a situation, like an underground train scenario, the more likely they are to die or suffer severe injury. Typically, in a medical scenario, the quicker you can get to a casualty, the better. So again, the security services and the rescue services will want to be as quick as possible to deal with the situation. And then regards to Putin, as the guest just said, actually, that he will want to show a strong hand. And so you can expect security operations to be going on right now.
Glenn, Russia's brush with Islamic extremism and terrorism isn't new, but this is the first attack of this kind that we've seen in many years, and the people, of course, will expect a strong response. There's a lot of criticism online as well, saying that the Western media has been very quick to call it retaliation for what happened in Syria.
Well, I don't. My first thought, as I alluded to, was that this is more likely something coming from a Chechen-related issue. The crackdown on homosexuals, whether you're a Muslim or not, as a Chechen, could well anger you. Chechnya has been long-suffering part of the Russian Federation for many years. And the Russian response has been so heavy-handed for so many years that they have exacerbated the problem dramatically. So that's my first thought. After that, it's also reflexive on the part of Muslims, whether they are resentful of the West or well integrated and supportive of it, the Western norms, to say, well, don't blame us reflexively, and that's just proving your bias. So I don't. That's a significant element that you point out, but it might have less thought or foundation to it than objective reality. But in this instance, when people die and bombs go off, dispassionate assessment is probably pretty hard to find.
All right. Glenn Carl, Joel Whitaker, thanks very much. We're going to have to take a short break at this point. When we come back, we'll talk about the Indian American who has emerged as the new face of American foreign policy. We'll talk to you about Nikki Haley.